At least I still have my balls, Your Honor. I heard my lawyer let out a quiet hiss, and out of the corner of my eye, I noticed him staring intently at me. I thought that a guy with an hourly rate as astronomical as his should have a bit more self-control. He had warned me, no, practically begged me, to stop using that phrase, arguing that we were risking the loss of public sympathy. Public sympathy, it seemed, tended to sway judges into handing down more lenient sentences, but I knew something my dear lawyer didn't. From my spot at the defendant's bench, sitting there in handcuffs, I had a better view of the judge than he did. I noticed how the judge had quickly hidden a smile the first time I said it. That smile, paired with an automatic glance at the victim of my assault, sitting angrily at his spot by his lawyer's table, told me everything I needed to know. I had a feeling the judge didn't like that bastard much either. May I have another word with my client, Your Honor? I doubt it'll do much good, Mr. Perkins. Your last 3 words to him clearly didn't help. This time, the judge openly smirked at me while my lawyer approached and whispered something. I didn't like that guy. I was a practical man, and he was an arrogant jerk. I'm the kind of guy who prefers to deal with what's in front of me, not what I'm handed, and he was nothing but condescending trash. If I'd had a choice, I wouldn't have hired him, but the choice wasn't mine. He was there because of my best friend Dave. Was Dave ridiculously wealthy and able to blow a fortune on my hopeless defense? No, Dave lived a comfortable but far from extravagant life, just like I used to, well, before I got thrown behind bars 8 months ago. No, my ridiculously expensive representative was being paid out of a GoFundMe account with way too many contributors, organized by Dave. Apparently, a lot of people didn't like the guy I'd assaulted either. When news of my GF account's wealth hit the media, my victim made a big show of launching one of his own. That turned out to have some lasting consequences for him. Seems like provoking my attack didn't win him many fans. I, on the other hand, seemed to be quite popular, at least if all the fan mail I was receiving was anything to go by, and I had the guts to match it. After one more plea from my lawyer to avoid using the provocative phrase, he returned to his table, and the two of us turned back to face the judge. Mr. Freeland, your counsel is correct. Your victim deserves more sympathy and respect than you are showing them. Once again, the glint in his eye, visible only to me because of my proximity and angle of view, contradicted the literal meaning of his words. I'm terribly sorry, Your Honor. I thought I was just stating the facts. I have a pair of testicles. The god I caught having sex with my soon-to-be ex-wife does not, unless, of course, he keeps them in a box. This time, the look the judge shot at me told me I'd gone too far, but it quickly softened. I decided to shut the hell up. So, Mr. Freeland, as I was saying, you have pled guilty to assault causing bodily harm, which carries a maximum sentence of 8 years in prison. No, please don't repeat what you said last time. We both glanced at the prosecution table, where the bastard had turned red again, whether from embarrassment or rage, I couldn't tell. Thank you, Mr. Freeland. Now, your attorney claims that at the time of the assault, you were in a state of temporary insanity and cannot be held fully responsible for your actions. The court-ordered psychiatric evaluation, however, appears to indicate that you are as sane as any other person. But as the psychiatrist notes, temporary insanity is, at this point, the judge consulted his notes, an autonomous phenomenon triggered by stimuli. I kept silent for once, heeding my lawyer's advice, and only answered direct questions. We've heard the victim's statement, so before I pass sentence, Mr. Freeland, could you look me in the eye and tell your story again, please? Of course, Your Honor. Here's what I remember. I paused and glanced at the gallery where my wife was seated. She lowered her eyes. She hadn't been in the courtroom the last time this story was told. I suppose she'd hoped to avoid the awkwardness. She probably had no idea it would come up again today. She must be facing a dilemma, I thought. Decisions. Should she bolt again or stay? Stay to show me she was supporting me, hoping I might forgive her and take her back. Fat chance. She'd have to endure the humiliation and public disgrace of being caught cheating under the glaring spotlight of everyone's attention, all on her own. My wife, a few friends, and I were having a pleasant evening at the bar when some loafer, the so-called victim, just walked up to my wife and asked her to dance. Since he didn't follow basic etiquette by asking me if I minded, I didn't like it, but I decided not to make a big deal out of it. She danced 2 or 3 songs with this jerk and then came back to the table, so I figured everything was fine. It was, until she disappeared a little later. Turns out, she left with the guy she'd been dancing with. I paused to calm myself. Even after all this time, the memory of my wife's monstrous betrayal still filled me with rage. I guess one of the psychiatrists was right when they said, where there's deep pain, there's strong anger. He described anger as a secondary emotion, saying it never arises on its own. I suppose, if nothing else, I learned something new during my time behind bars. Please continue, Mr. Freeland. Well, I figured he'd take her straight to his place, and a few people knew where he lived, so I went directly there. Sure enough, his big fancy car was parked in the garage. He and my my wife, must have been in a hurry. Not only was the garage door open, but the interior door to the house was unlocked too. I didn't have to break in, Your Honor. I just walked right in. There was definitely no mention of any damage in the police report, Mr. Freeland. You'll have to forgive me, Your Honor, but from this point, my memory becomes increasingly hazy. I remember feeling angrier and angrier as I wandered through the house looking for them, and I vaguely recall reaching the bottom of the stairs. I heard grunting and moaning coming from what I assumed was one of the bedrooms upstairs. I'm sorry, but that's it. I don't remember anything after that until the police arrived. One moment, I was at the base of the stairs, and the next, they were there. I'm honestly not sure whether the images in my head from that 15-minute gap are real or if they're based on what the police, during their interrogation, claimed must have happened. I tried my best to keep a puzzled expression on my face while the judge scrutinized me. Much of the argument for my very expensive, and admittedly excellent, lawyer hinged on the fact that my confession that night was signed while I was not in my right mind. The police had made a mistake, and for a significant period, my whereabouts in custody were unaccounted for. My lawyer planted the idea that I might have been interrogated or intimidated off the record, with the police exploiting my mentally vulnerable state to implant a memory, likely by repeating it multiple times. That memory then became my reality, leading me to sign a confession stating that this was exactly how it happened. Truth be told, of course, I remember what happened. Every single detail. From the moment I heard the sounds of sex coming from the bedroom, climbing the stairs, following the noise to the open door, to seeing my wife on all fours, naked as the day she was born, being penetrated by the bastard stealing her from me, the same guy I'd watched her dancing with earlier, that I don't know if it was true madness, but something inside me snapped right then and there. And honestly, I don't think I can be blamed for my actions. The fornicating couple had no idea I was there. Watching in shock as their betrayal unfolded before my eyes, she was moaning, screaming, and encouraging him, shattering any faint hope that she might have been an unwilling participant in this private sex party. I could see that his manhood was larger than mine, and the thought that he was giving her something I never could drove me into a wild rage. From that moment, I knew I would forever be a cuckold. From that moment, I would never measure up to him, unless I did something to even the score that I don't recall making a conscious decision to do or not do what came next. I only remember thinking, maybe I'll always be a cuckold, and my manhood will never measure up to his, but at least I'll still have my balls. When I was younger, I played as a defender on my rugby team and often switched to opposing teams during practice. That meant I could kick exactly where it counted with incredible force, and that's exactly what I did. He reacted instantly. His movements were almost comical. He lunged forward to escape the pain, twisting my ex-wife in the process so that she hit her head on the headboard, stunning her. Then he rolled off her onto his back, his legs spread wide, all the while gasping for air as if he'd been holding his breath for a year. The pain must not have fully registered yet because his dazed eyes shifted from his mangled groin to my smug smile. The look of terror on his face was enough to make me smile, no matter how long I've been locked up. Yes, Mr. Freeland, your lawyer has made that abundantly clear. I understand the police station in question has already implemented some significant protocol changes. There's no doubt that you were at the scene of the incident, and the fact that you provided first aid to the victim, something we've heard from 3 witnesses, is not exactly in line with your character. The fact that your wife didn't witness you actually assaulting the victim is irrelevant to the case. There's no question that you caused the injury, which resulted in the victim's testicles having to be surgically removed. The only matter at hand is your mental state at the time of the assault. As I said, the lawful sentence is 8 years of imprisonment, although I am permitted to consider the provocation you endured in your likely mental state at the time. Regarding the deterrent aspect of sentencing, well, I doubt you will ever face such an emotional and, frankly, disgusting provocation again. At these last words, the judge cast a look of judgment and disgust at my wife. She shrank into her seat. I couldn't help but notice that none of her friends were sitting beside her to offer support. From what I'd heard from the quiet safety of my cell, she didn't have many friends left. My case had made headlines nationwide. First, because of the notoriety of my victim. Second, due to stories about how certain celebrities used their fame to engage in highly immoral acts with minimal consequences. And third, because of the GoFundMe account. Apparently, some of the husbands previously humiliated by my wife's lover were quite wealthy, and the donation total reached 6 figures before the general public even began contributing. Mike David vs. Goliath story must have struck a chord as thousands of people chipped in their spare change and often more. The massive size of the fund ensured its fame and kept me, along with my wife's sins, at the forefront of the nation's attention, as well as that of our social circle. It became socially unacceptable to do anything but publicly shame her. I must have drifted into my thoughts because suddenly, I heard applause in the courtroom. When the judge left the room, we all stood, and I looked around to see people smiling at me and giving me thumbs up. I turned to my lawyer. What the hell? He ruled that you were temporarily insane. You got lucky, man. He sentenced you to probation in 3 years of a suspended sentence. You're a free man. We shook hands, and he ensured I was escorted out. A bailiff shook my hand, patted me on the back, and leaned in to whisper, "I'm really glad you still have your balls, man." He escorted me, grinning madly, and my stern lawyer through the back exit, bypassing the waiting journalists. Once outside, I thanked my lawyer, and we went our separate ways. Turning the corner at the courthouse steps, I glanced toward the main entrance and saw the pack of reporters waiting for me. Although, I think, pack is a collective term for hyenas. My change of prison attire must have thrown them off a bit, as no one paid me any attention while I walked past. I noticed another small group of people gathered on the steps opposite me. Damn it, my victim was holding his own press conference with his lawyer. They were standing on the lower steps in front of half a dozen cameras as I approached them. When I got within earshot, I heard the former local superstar, now publicly exposed for the scumbag he truly was, declare, "I vow to appeal today's ruling by the judge." This was a travesty of justice. Furthermore, I will file a civil lawsuit to clear my name, because having sex with married women is not a crime. At first, one, then more of the guys operating the cameras turned their reporters toward me. By the time I reached the former star, standing on the same level of the steps as him, half the cameras were pointed at me. The difference in height and weight, he was nearly a foot taller and outweighed me by 50 kilos, was only amplified as I invaded his personal space. The bastard actually took a step back from me, tripped over his own feet, and landed on his backside. From the ground, he quickly glanced at the camera lenses and realized how weak that made him look. I gave him my best smile. Good luck with the appeal and civil suit. Whether I win or lose, I'm still sticking to my opinion. He turned bright crimson. Screw you, and you too, Mark Lavalier. The next day's local newspaper headlines were downright hilarious. Variations of husband keeps his cool, little competent guy, stands up to disgraced pro football player, and even Lavalier loses his cool again, made the rounds. All the buzz caused my GoFundMe balance to keep growing, so I hired the best civil attorney I could find, hoping he might mitigate the damage from my inevitable loss. I waited 1 month, then 2, but the anticipated lawsuit never came. Finally, one evening, I found out why that I was quietly sipping a beer at a local bar on my way home when a large man approached me from behind. I knew he was large because he cast a shadow over me. He asked me not to turn around but explained that he was part of a men's support group that helps wronged husbands. Members of their group had a little chat with Lavalier, and he decided not to file a lawsuit against me. I didn't pry into why Lavalier came to that conclusion, but if all the friends of my new, mysterious ally were as big as him, I could easily imagine it. I offered to buy my new friend a beer, but he declined, so I simply thanked him and respected his wish to keep me facing the bar until he made it to the door. It's nice to have friends, even if you don't know them. After that, I watched Mark's career with interest. He was quietly ousted from the major league, where he had once been a star, and ended up in the minors. According to media estimates, his income dropped by more than 90%. About a year later, he made the news again. It was one of those evening shows that interview former celebrities. A friend recorded it for me. Lavalier continued whining, his voice noticeably higher-pitched about the unfairness of it all. He claimed he had lost his testicles and that his testosterone levels had plummeted. He had lost muscle mass, drive, and aggression. This only added to the ridicule he faced every time he ran onto the field. He was suspended for 2 games after an opponent allegedly whispered, "At least I still have my balls." Cameras caught Mark turning and slapping the guy. If he'd punched him, it might have earned him some respect, but the slap only further damaged his reputation. Less than a month after that, he was fired when he was caught taking testosterone supplements, banned in professional sports as performance enhancers. After that, I lost track of him and only heard his name mentioned in discussions about the dangers of marital infidelity. As for Linda, her situation wasn't much better. Her friends, relatives, and acquaintances quickly realized that siding with her would mean being dragged through the mud brought on by her disgrace. They ran for the hills, flinging dirt at her as they fled. The media didn't hold back on the details of how she betrayed me. She became the poster child for the bad wife. Bereft of family and friends, hounded by the press, and even by strangers on the street, she tried to escape the area. My family lawyer, who, as you might have guessed, is the best money can buy, ensured she couldn't take the kids far from me. In desperation, she turned to alcohol. When her children, left alone at home, called to tell me she had driven into the garage through the sliding doors and they couldn't wake her up, I made sure the police got there before I did. I left the garage door open so the reporters could photograph the kids' play equipment in the space next to where Linda usually parked her car. Her DUI arrest was just the cherry on top. My lawyer quickly convinced the judge that Linda was an unfit mother, though he was savvy enough not to propose that custody be granted to me, a convicted felon. Instead, the clever guy suggested that my parents be given legal guardianship. Thanks to my devoted supporters, the judge readily agreed to the generous financial support I was able to provide them. I had just moved in with my parents. Linda began drinking even more, which drew the attention of social workers monitoring her visits with the children. After a few months, she gave up and moved out of the area. She sends them postcards for every birthday and Christmas. They don't care. My fame, or rather, infamy, attracted a certain kind of available women, and things might have worked out if I were the type drawn to such women. But I wasn't. Eventually, I met an incredible woman. Actually, that word doesn't fully capture her essence. I admire her. She fled her country with 2 young children, her nieces. Her sister and brother-in-law were killed early in the conflict between their countries. But most importantly, she loves me for who I am, not for my notoriety. Although, late at night, after we've played our little games of hide and seek, she sometimes whispers in my ear, "I'm glad you still have your balls, Jim." Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.